So, what if I told you that by this time tomorrow, your brain is going to actively, and I mean permanently delete about 50% of everything you learned today?
Yeah, it's a terrifying thought, honestly.
It really is. But the crazy part is, it's not a glitch in your system, it's actually a biological feature. So welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and today I'm here with our resident expert to talk about why your brain is, well, kind of actively sabotaging your memory.
And more importantly, how you can hack the system to stop it from happening. Glad to be here for this one.
Thanks for joining, because we are exploring this wildly frustrating phenomenon that, every single one of us experiences. You spend hours learning something new, right?
All right.
You're prepping for this massive presentation, or maybe you're mastering a new software tool, or just reading a really dense, fascinating book. And in the moment, everything clicks perfectly. You just have it down cold.
Oh, totally. You feel the absolute certainty of having absorbed the material.
Exactly. But then you wake up the next day, you got to pull up that information, and it's entirely gone.
Just evaporated overnight. It's universally maddening.
It really is. So to figure out how to close this memory gap, we're turning to a pretty unique set of source materials today. We're looking at an internal lesson script from a homeschool curriculum framework. It's called Empowered Homefront.
And I should add, if you're listening and you're not a homeschooling parent, definitely stick with us here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the foundation of this framework, it's built on over a century of hardcore cognitive science research. We're talking foundational studies from 1885 all the way to massive peer-reviewed replications in 2015.
Right, because the psychological mechanics of how a child learns to read or do long division, those are the exact same biological mechanics you and I use to memorize a quarterly report or learn a new coding language.
Exactly. The architecture of the human brain doesn't change just because you trade a classroom for a boardroom,
Yeah.
This particular source material just happens to be brilliant at taking those dense cognitive science concepts and distilling them into practical, everyday applications.
Yeah, so let's ground this in a story from the curriculum that I think it just perfectly captures the frustration we're talking about. It's about a child named Jackson.
Ah, yes, the flashcard story.
Right. So Jackson and his parent are working on his reading skills. They're going through this stack of flashcards, word by word. And Jackson is absolutely nailing it. He recognizes every single word instantly.
He's on a roll.
He is. So confident in his mastery. The parent puts the flashcards away, opens the actual reading book, points to the exact same words in a sentence, and Jackson just stares blankly.
Like he's never seen them before.
Exactly. It's as if he has never seen a single one of those words in his entire life.
And the parent's immediate reaction is pure exasperation. I mean, their thought process is, he just had it. Literally 2 minutes ago, he was reading these flawlessly. What in the world just happened?
It's completely baffling. To me, it feels like, well, imagine spending 3 hours designing a beautiful, complex spreadsheet on your computer.
Oh, I've been there.
Right. You hit save.
Yeah.
You watch the little progress bar complete. You know it's saved.
Yeah.
But when you go to open the file the next morning to show your boss, the document is completely blank.
Yeah, the file isn't actually there, even though the interface, like the immediate flashcard session told you it was perfectly saved.
Right.
And when this blank document moment happens to us, the source identifies a few incredibly common reactions that we all have.
Well, I know when it happens to me, my immediate instinct is to just brute force it. I'll sit there and stare at the same spreadsheet for an hour, or I'll reread the same paragraph 5 times.
Hoping it finally sticks.
Yeah, I'll drill the concepts into my head until I'm exhausted.
And that brute force instinct is practically universal. In fact, the source material identifies that exact behavior as one of the 4 default reactions we have to forgetting.
Okay, what are the 4?
So they are reteaching the entire lesson from scratch, assigning more worksheets, or in an adult context, printing out more reading material on the exact same topic, drilling the exact same problem 20 times in a row, or finally just throwing your hands up, skipping it, and moving on out of pure fatigue.
I mean, drilling it 20 times feels so logical in the moment. You think, my brain didn't get it the first 10 times, so I'm going to sweat it out and force this information into my head.
It does feel good. It produces a real feeling of productivity.
It really does.
No.
But I'm guessing it's not actually productive.
No. It creates a powerful illusion of putting in the work. But the cognitive science layered into this curriculum is definitive here. Every single one of those 4 reactions is entirely wrong.
Wow. All of them.
All of them. The first 3, the reteaching, the extra worksheets, and the endless drilling the source, categorizes those as busy work disguised as review.
Busy work disguised as review. Oof. That is a brutal realization for anyone who has spent an entire evening cramming for a test or a big presentation.
It is, because it creates this vicious, exhausting cycle. You teach, the brain forgets, you panic, and then you reteach from scratch. You end up burning out because you're spending immense amounts of time and energy without actually building long-term memory.
And the fourth reaction, just skipping it, obviously guarantees the learning never happens at all.
Exactly.
But wait, if drilling the same problem 20 times feels that logical, and it produces a real mental sweat, why does the brute force method fail so completely?
To understand that failure, we really have to undergo a total paradigm shift regarding what forgetting actually is. The core mantra of this entire framework is, forgetting is not failure, it is your brain's filter.
Wait, hold on. I need to stop you there. Are you seriously saying that human biology dictates we just, dump half of a dense, insightful article overnight?
I am.
Because that sounds like a massive evolutionary design flaw.
I know it sounds like a flaw, but it's actually an essential survival mechanism. This brings us to a foundational concept in cognitive science known as the forgetting curve.
Okay, the forgetting curve.
Yeah. It was first studied way back in 1885 by a researcher named Hermann Ebbinghaus. To test the pure mechanics of memory, Ebbinghaus created thousands of these nonsense syllables, words like WID or ZOF.
So his brain would have no prior associations to them.
Precisely. No emotional connections, no context. He memorized lists of these syllables and then tracked his own forgetting over various periods of time.
So he was testing raw data retention, essentially stripping away anything that might help him cheat the system.
Right, and his findings were shocking. They were so incredibly consistent that a massive study by researchers Murr and Dross in 2015 replicated his exact experiment.
Over a century later.
Yep, and they got the exact same results. They confirmed that roughly 50% of what you learn fades within the very first 24 hours.
50%. Half of everything we take in, just gone by tomorrow.
Gone. And to your point about it being a design flaw, think about how much sensory data, trivial conversation, and useless information you encounter on, say, a random Tuesday.
Oh, right. It's constant.
If your brain kept everything perfectly accessible, you would be totally paralyzed by information overload. So the brain actively sweeps out information it doesn't think it needs to survive.
It treats that brilliant article you read exactly like it treats the color of the car that drove past you on your commute. It just takes out the trash.
That's a great way to put it. It tucks out the trash.
But if my brain is taking out the trash, how do I signal to it, hey, keep this is actually important? If the fix isn't reteaching it louder or drilling it 20 times until my eyes cross, what is the actual mechanism to save the file?
The mechanism is a concept called retrieval at the right time. You have to force your brain to pull the information out of memory entirely on its own at spaced intervals.
Spaced intervals, so not immediately.
Right. You don't review it 5 minutes later. You don't review it the same afternoon. You let it rest for a few days, let the memory start to fade a bit, and then you force yourself to recall it.
So you're intentionally interrupting the forgetting curve right as the memory is starting to slip away. Retrieving a memory, it feels a bit like walking through a dense, overgrown forest.
Okay, I like this.
Like the first time you learn a concept, you hack a trail through the brush with a machete. If you walk that exact same path 5 minutes later, the trail is completely clear. It's totally effortless.
Right.
But if you wait 3 days, the weeds and vines have started to grow back. The struggle to recall the information is the act of rehacking that trail. And if you do it enough times, spaced far enough apart, eventually that jungle path becomes a paved highway.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and the science backs it up. The source references a 2006 meta-analysis by Cepeda and colleagues, which looked at over 250 different comparisons of memory retention.
Wow, 250.
Yeah. And spaced retrieval is one of the most heavily proven strategies in all of learning science because it physically alters those neural pathways you're describing.
Well, understanding the abstract science, knowing that we need to hack the path through the forest at spaced intervals, that's great in theory. But what does that actually look like in our daily lives?
That's where the curriculum is so helpful. It gives us 3 very practical subject-by-subject applications. They call them conversions, moving from the habit of cramming to the habit of spaced retrieval.
Okay, let's dive into those.
All right, conversion 1 focuses on math and hard facts. This applies anytime you need to remember a specific static piece of information.
Okay, so the cramming way to do this, which I vividly remember from my own childhood, is drilling 50 multiplication problems in a single afternoon.
We all remember that.
You sit at the kitchen table, 7 times 8 is 56. 7 times 8 is 56. You get to the bottom of the worksheet and get a perfect score. You feel like a genius.
But it's entirely based on immediate sheer repetition. By Friday's quiz, the answer is just gone.
Right. So how does the spaced way work?
The spaced retrieval alternative operates completely differently. You teach 7 times 8 on a Tuesday, and then you do not drill it 50 times. You just let it rest.
You do nothing.
You do nothing. Then, on Thursday morning, maybe while you're pouring cereal, you casually ask, hey, random question, what's 7 times 8?
Oh, wow. No worksheet, no warning, just catching them completely off guard.
Catching them off guard is the entire point. Research by cognitive scientists Roediger and Karpik outlines the underlying mechanism here. When you drill with flashcards right after learning, you are relying on recognition.
Recognition.
Yes. Recognition is level 2 learning. The answer is fresh, the context is right there, and your brain is simply recognizing a pattern it saw 3 seconds ago. It gives you an illusion of competence.
Oh. This circles perfectly back to the Jackson story.
Yes, exactly.
He recognized the words on the sash cards because he was deeply entrenched in flashcard mode. His brain was just pattern matching the shapes of the words on the cards, but he hadn't truly learned them.
Precisely. But when you wait 2 days and ask a question cold at breakfast, you are forcing recall.
And recall is different from recognition.
Very different. Recall is level 3 learning. You're executing the knowledge cold, days later with 0 warm-up. That requires the brain to actually do the work of reaching back into the archives and pulling the information forward.
That physical effort of retrieval is what paves the highway.
Exactly.
So for you listening, if you're trying to memorize key metrics for a presentation, you cannot just stare at your spreadsheet for 3 hours tonight. You look at it, put it away, and 2 days later, while you're driving to work or making coffee, you ask yourself out loud, wait, what were our Q3 growth numbers in the European market? You have to force the cold recall without looking at your phone.
Perfect application. Which brings us to conversion 2, reading comprehension. This is where the strategy shifts from static facts to complex webs of ideas.
Now, the cramming way for reading comprehension is something I am incredibly guilty of.
Well, me too.
You finish a chapter, realize you completely zoned out for the last 3 pages, and your eyes immediately jump back to the top of the page to reread the exact same text.
Yeah.
It feels like you're being diligent.
It feels diligent, yeah, but your brain is actually playing a trick on you called the fluency illusion.
The fluency illusion.
Right. Because your eyes have to scan those words, they move faster over the text the second time around. Your brain interprets that physical reading speed as cognitive mastery. You think, I'm reading this so smoothly, I must understand it.
Oh, wow.
But you're really just recognizing familiar words. You are not building comprehension.
Okay, so the spaced retrieval alternative has to fix this.
It fixes it beautifully. Let's say a child reads a chapter about the water cycle on a Monday. You do not quiz them at the end of the chapter. On Wednesday at the dinner table, you say, can you explain to me how a cloud turns into rain? Pretend I have no idea.
I love that. Pretend I have no idea.
That phrasing is critical. The curriculum classifies this as the teach level or level 4 learning. If you can explain a concept in your own words, using your own analogies, in a completely different physical setting than where you originally learned it, you genuinely own that knowledge.
And if they can't explain it?
It's not a failure. It just highlights the exact gap in the neural pathway that needs to be addressed.
That makes a lot of sense. Cold recall works beautifully for a static fact like a math equation. But when the information is a complex web of ideas like a chapter on the water cycle or a dense industry report, you can't just flashcard a thesis statement.
Right.
I actually use this exact technique in the workplace. If I read a complex white paper on Monday, I don't highlight it to death. On Wednesday, I'll try to explain the core thesis to a colleague by the coffee machine. Or if I'm alone, I will literally talk to my windshield on the commute home.
To your windshield.
Yeah. I'll say, okay, explain this new market strategy to me like I am 5.
Yeah.
And if I start stumbling over my words, I know I don't really understand it yet.
It's an incredibly powerful self-assessment tool.
Yeah.
You don't need a multiple choice exam to know if someone understands a topic. You just need to see if they can teach it to a novice from scratch.
Okay, let's move to the final technique. Conversion 3 focuses on vocabulary, or for adults, any kind of complex terminology or jargon.
Now, the cramming approach here is what I like to call the classic punishment style of education.
Oh, no.
You know the one. Write the new vocabulary word 10 times in a row until your hand cramps and your brain completely checks out.
Oh, I remember that so well.
You can spell the word perfectly on Tuesday, but by Friday, it has just vanished into the ether.
So what's the alternative? The curriculum call it spaced progression, right?
Exactly. Let's say the vocabulary word is reluctant. You introduce the definition on Monday. On day 2, Tuesday, you ask the learner to use it in a sentence about their brother. Then you let it rest.
Okay.
On day 4, Thursday, you ask, hey, which word from Monday means you don't want to do something?
Oh, interesting. So you aren't just spacing out the reviews. You are fundamentally changing what you are asking the brain to do each time.
Yes. You are actively raising the difficulty, lifting heavier cognitive weights with each pass. Day 2 is level 3 learning, executing and using the word in context. But day 4 is level 4 learning. You have to retrieve the word from memory based purely on its definition and connect it back to a lesson from 3 days ago.
To map this to an adult scenario, let's say you're learning a complex new business concept like heuristics.
Good one.
On Monday, you read the definition, a mental shortcut that allows people to solve problems quickly. On day 2, you don't just reread the definition, you challenge yourself to identify one heuristic your team uses in its marketing strategy. You actively apply it.
And then you drop it entirely.
Right. Then on day 4, you're reviewing a project and you ask yourself, wait, what was that H word from Monday that describes the mental shortcuts our customers are taking here?
By day 4, you're demanding that your brain retrieve the specific terminology based only on the conceptual shadow it left behind. That is incredibly difficult work for the brain to do.
Which brings us to a massive hurdle. Casual recall for facts, the explain it to me method for reading comprehension, and spaced progression for complex terminology. These 3 techniques are brilliant, but to actually implement them, you have to abandon a very, very comfortable habit.
You do. The source material refers to this as the sacrifice.
The sacrifice.
Yeah, there is a significant psychological cost to making this transition. When a child forgets a word they knew yesterday, or when you yourself freeze up trying to remember a vital metric during a meeting, every single human instinct screams at you to sit down and reteach it or reread it immediately.
Because you desperately want to fix the gap right now to alleviate the anxiety.
Exactly. You have to willingly let go of the safety blanket of immediate repetition.
And letting the brain struggle to find the answer a few days later feels incredibly uncomfortable. It honestly feels like you are failing. You're sitting there making coffee, trying to remember the Q3 metrics, and your brain is just grinding its gears.
There's real friction.
It makes you feel stupid in the moment.
It does. And we are deeply conditioned by traditional education to believe that smooth, easy recall immediately after learning means we are smart. And consequently, we believe that struggling to recall something means we're slow or that our memory is failing.
That does not.
No, cognitive science proves the exact opposite is true. That friction, that intense mental reaching you feel when you're trying to remember what 7 times 8 is or what the definition of a heuristic is 2 days later, that is not the sensation of failure.
It's the sensation of growth.
It is the literal physical sensation of a neural pathway thickening. Struggle equals strength. You just have to trust the space.
Struggle equals strength.
Right.
That is a profoundly liberating reframe. The struggle is not a sign of a bad memory. The struggle is the actual sensation of a permanent memory being built.
Absolutely.
If we can get past that initial discomfort, the ultimate payoff is massive. The source paints this fantastic picture of success. Imagine 3 weeks from now. You haven't looked at a single worksheet. You haven't reviewed any flashcards. You haven't highlighted a single page of your notes.
No.
And someone asks you a highly specific question about a complex topic you learned a month ago. And you absolutely nail it. You deliver the answer with total confidence. Not because you frantically drilled it into your skull the night before, but because you respected your biology.
You let the information rest, you forced the cold recall, and you built a permanent highway in your brain.
That is the ultimate goal of learning. Real, durable, accessible knowledge that doesn't just evaporate the moment the test is over or the meeting ends.
Yeah.
So to summarize our mission today, if you want to truly learn something and keep it forever, you have to respect the filter. Space out your reviews. Force yourself to retrieve the information cold, without hints, days after you first encountered it. Embrace the friction, because what sticks, stays.
You know, looking at all this data on the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, it leaves me with a rather provocative thought.
Oh. Lay it on me.
Well, if our brains are biologically hardwired to filter out 50% of everything we encounter within 24 hours, unless we specifically force ourselves to retrieve it,
Yeah.
how much of our own daily lives are we actively losing? I mean, think about our personal histories, the fascinating conversations we have with friends, or those brilliant passing ideas we get in the shower. How much of our own rich internal lives are we permanently losing simply because we never prompt ourselves to recall them 2 days later?
Wow. That is honestly a little haunting,
Yeah.
but incredibly motivating. It really makes you evaluate what you're casually letting slip away into the biological trash bin.
Doesn't it?
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of the mind. Try forcing a little cold recall tomorrow morning. Let the gears grind, embrace the struggle, and we will catch you next time.